The day she was sold, the wind was restless. It carried the dry breath of the desert across the wooden streets of a small frontier town that had forgotten mercy long ago. The sun sat low and wide, throwing molten light over faces hard as rock. A wooden stage stood before the saloon where laughter spilled like rot. Upon it stood a woman, thin, filthy, her dark hair tangled into ropes, wrists tied before her. She didn't beg, didn't look at them. Only the faint rise and fall of her chest proved she still lived. "They say she's Apache," someone whispered. "Last one of her kind." The sheriff laughed, hat tilted back. "Ain't much left of her now. Starved near to death, no papers, no family. Might fetch a few dollars if anyone's fool enough to feed her." The crowd tittered. Children peered from behind skirts. The woman kept her gaze on the horizon, where the sky met dust in a line of silver heat. A fly crawled along her cheek. She didn't move. A voice drifted from somewhere in that murmur. "They called her savage." I remember thinking how wrong they were. She looked more like something sacred that had been stepped on too many times. The sheriff's hammer fell once, twice, before a voice cut through the laughter. "I'll take her." Elias Rourke stepped forward. His boots were caked in trail dust, his shirt rolled at the sleeves. He had the look of a man who'd stopped searching for anything years ago, except maybe peace. The crowd turned curious. He was known to most, quiet, widowed, rancher on the edge of town. They said his wife had left him for a gambler, said he drank alone now, talked to his horses more than people. He looked at the woman on the block, not as a purchase, but as a puzzle. "How much?" he asked. $5, said the sheriff with a smirk. "That's charity more than trade." Elias paid without haggling. When he climbed the steps, the sheriff handed him a rope. He ignored it, untied her wrists himself. She staggered, swaying like a leaf in dry wind. He slipped his coat from his shoulders and draped it over her narrow frame. For the first time, her eyes lifted, not in gratitude, but confusion. No man had touched her gently in years. "Come on," he said, voice low. "You'll catch cold." As he led her away, laughter trailed after them like dust. "He'll regret that just like the last one," someone jeered. By sundown, they rode past the last outpost of town. The world widened. Open plains, the faint scent of rain. She sat behind him on the horse, motionless, clutching the coat around her. Every jolt of the saddle sent pain through her bones. She wondered why he hadn't tied her, why he didn't look back to make sure she hadn't run. "Ain't much," he said finally, without turning. "My ranch. But there's water. You'll rest." His words floated between them, soft as smoke. She whispered something in Apache, too faint to catch. When he asked, she said, "Water is life." He nodded once, as though that made all the sense in the world. By nightfall, lantern light flickered on a small ranch at the edge of nowhere. The wind carried the smell of horses and wet wood. A woman stood on the porch, arms folded. "You brought her here?" May Rourke's voice was gravel. Elias stepped down from the horse. "She needed shelter. She's Apache," May said. "You know what people'll say." Elias met his mother's eyes, steady, unflinching. "Let him talk." May sighed through her nose and turned inside. "You never did learn to pick the easy kind." He led Naya. She had whispered that name once when he'd asked what to call her, toward the barn. Inside, hay glowed gold in lamplight. He laid out a blanket, a bucket of clean water, and bread. She knelt to drink from the bucket. Before she could lower her face, he took it from her hands, poured the water into a tin cup, and handed it back. Her fingers brushed his, rough against rough, and she paused. Something unfamiliar rippled through her, shame, gratitude, maybe both. "Thank you," she murmured, the words thick on her tongue. He nodded. "Get some sleep." When he left, she sat in silence, staring at the cup as if it were gold. Outside, the night hummed. Crickets, wind, the low creak of boards as he moved about. She began to hum, softly, an old tune, one her mother once sang when the fires burned low. Elias paused on the porch. That sound, the hum, the aching sweetness of it, cut through the years like light through a shutter. He closed his eyes. He had not heard such a thing since before betrayal hollowed him out. Days blurred into rhythm. She rose before dawn, fetched water, mended fences, fed the hens. May watched from the porch, eyes narrow, mouth tight, but she said nothing. Naya spoke little. Her English came haltingly like a child's first steps, but her silence was never empty. It was full of memory, of fear, of something she wouldn't yet name. The townsfolk began to talk. They saw her when she came with Elias for supplies, hair still tangled, skin burned by sun, walking 2 steps behind him. "She's the one he bought," Clara James whispered, lips curling. "Poor Elias, doesn't he know she'll shame him?" By noon, gossip spread like spilled whiskey. At the saloon, Sheriff Doolin chuckled. "Man's got strange taste." Apache blood never brought luck. Elias ignored them. But their words found Naya all the same. She felt their eyes, their laughter. In every mirror, she saw dirt they could never wash off. That night, Elias found her outside, mending a fence even after dark. "You don't have to work this late," he said. She didn't look up. "It helps me stay." He leaned on the post beside her. "Stay?" her voice faltered. "Not think." He nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." For a long moment, only the crickets spoke. Then she asked, "Why you buy me?" He looked out at the hills. "Didn't buy you." "Freed you." She said nothing, but her eyes glistened in the lantern glow, and he could not tell if it was from tears or wind. As days grew longer, something gentler began to take root. Naya would hum while working. He'd find himself listening without meaning to. She began leaving food by his plate, quiet acts that spoke louder than words. He noticed her hands, scarred but steady. Her eyes, once hollow, now alive with small defiance. One evening he found her beside the corral, murmuring to a restless mare. The animal's flank twitched. Her breathing slowed under Naya's touch. "You got away with things that break easy," he said softly. She turned, a small smile touching her mouth. "So do you." He smiled too, surprised by the warmth that rose in him. Later, by the fire, she noticed the glint of a ring on his hand. "Your wife?" He nodded. "Gone years now. She died." He hesitated. "No, she ran off." Naya's face softened. "You still love her?" He stared into the flames. "Maybe I loved who I thought she was." For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped, a log collapsing inward. She turned to the window where moonlight spilled across the floorboards. "Then maybe love can be learned again." He looked up, but she'd already turned away. Outside, thunder murmured over the hills. Inside, 2 people sat by a dying fire, neither knowing that something old and broken in each of them had just begun to heal. The rains came hard that spring, not gentle showers, but a sky cracked open, spilling everything it had held back for years. The air smelled of iron and mud. By the 3rd day, the creek had swollen into a river that tore through fences and carried away half the chicken coop. Elias saddled his horse before dawn, pulling on his slicker. "The herd's down by the lowlands," he said. "If that river jumps, they'll drown." Naya stood by the doorway, the lamplight painting her face in gold and shadow. "I go too." He shook his head. "Stay put. Ain't safe." Her chin lifted slightly. "You need 2 hands." "I come." He hesitated. Something about her tone, calm but final. At last he nodded once. "Stay close." They rode into the storm. Rain whipped sideways, blinding, cold enough to sting. The river roared like a beast. Cattle scattered in the dark, their eyes wild with fear. Elias shouted orders she couldn't hear over the thunder, but she followed his movements. Steady, sure. When the bridge gave way, it happened too fast. A sound like the world splitting apart, wood snapping, water surging. And then Elias was gone, pulled under by the current. Naya didn't think. She tied a rope around her waist, anchored it to a fence post, and dove. The water hit like glass. The cold stole her breath. She saw flashes, a hand, a hat, his face under the foam. She reached him, fingers locking around his collar, lungs burning, dragging, kicking, praying. The rope strained. When they broke the surface, he was coughing, half-conscious, clutching her arm. She dragged him onto the muddy bank and collapsed beside him. Chest heaving, rain-washing blood from her knuckles. He rolled onto his side, spitting river water, then looked at her, her hair plastered, eyes fierce and shining. "You fool woman," he rasped, voice shaking. "You could have drowned." She shivered, smiling faintly through exhaustion. Then I would have gone with purpose. For a long while, neither moved. Only the river kept talking, carrying the rest of the storm away. By night, a fire flickered weakly inside the cabin. The storm had passed, leaving everything damp and breathing. Naya sat wrapped in a blanket near the hearth, while Elias cleaned the rope burns on her wrists. "You saved my life," he said softly. She stared into the flames. "Maybe it was yours worth saving." "Not mine." He looked at her then. Really looked. "Don't say that." Her lips trembled. "It's true. I've been sold, beaten, starved. They said I was barren. No man keeps what he can't breed. So they sold me again until no one wanted me." He reached for her hand, rough against rough. "You ain't barren," he said, voice breaking. "You're full of more life than I ever was." The firelight made her eyes gleam like wet amber. She tried to speak, failed. He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Slow, careful, like handling something fragile. She leaned forward until their foreheads touched. No kiss. Just the sound of breath shared between them. The language of two souls who'd finally stopped running. Morning brought sun like forgiveness. Steam rose from the wet grass, and for the first time, birds returned to the fence posts. By noon, Clara James came riding up the path, face pinched, two women trailing behind her. She stopped at the porch. "It's gone far enough, Elias. Folks are talking. That Apache woman's bringing shame on you." May Rourke appeared behind him before he could speak. "She stays," May said, eyes sharp. "This house has seen enough leaving." Clara's lips parted, but the older woman's voice left no room. "You want to gossip? Do it from the road." Clara turned red and rode off, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. Later that day, Elias rode to town. He walked into the saloon where whispers had long followed his back. He stood at the bar, voice clear and even. "Any man who calls her less than decent best not speak near me again." No one answered. Silence hung thick, heavy with respect or fear. It didn't matter which. When he came home, Naya was outside, hanging wet clothes on the line. She looked up at him, expression unreadable. He only said, "They won't talk no more." Her eyes softened. "People always talk." "Then let 'em," he said. "They don't know you like I do." The days turned warmer. The land, once gray, came alive again. Wildflowers crawled through the cracks in the fence posts. Naya planted more near the graves at the edge of the property, Elias's parents resting under crooked wooden crosses. She whispered something in Apache over the soil, a blessing carried by wind. Elias watched her from the gate. There was peace in her now, the kind that comes only after surviving too much. When she turned, he was closer than she expected. Her hand brushed his arm. For a moment, neither breathed. "If I stay," she whispered, "you'll never be rid of me." He smiled, slow, quiet, the kind that started in the eyes. "Reckon I don't want to be." The space between them vanished. The kiss came soft as rain, uncertain, trembling, but real. The wind paused. Even the horses seemed to listen. Weeks later, a Sunday morning dawned clear as glass. In the small wooden church at the edge of town, Elias stood beside her. The preacher hesitated, his gaze uncertain, his words thick, but Elias nodded once. "She takes my name?" Naya's dress was plain, white linen stitched by May's own hands. The shawl rested around her shoulders like a promise. When the preacher spoke the final words, sunlight streamed through the cracked window, landing across her face. She whispered something only Elias heard, a prayer in Apache soft as the wind. "Now I am not the last." Outside, Clara watched from her wagon, eyes unreadable. Children ran through the dust, laughter rising like birds. Naya stepped from the church into that open light. Her hand slipped into Elias's, sure and steady. For once no one whispered. Even the land seemed to breathe easier. Years later, an old man's voice would recall it. They said she was unfit, unclean, unwanted. But love ain't about who's pure, it's about who's still willing. I seen her again, years after. Children running through wildflowers, her laughter bright as water after drought. And I knew then redemption don't come from being chosen. It comes from staying even when no one asks you to. And across that wide prairie where the wind still carries her song, the world keeps remembering the woman who refused to disappear.